Welcome to our studio. The learning curve is huge.
Now you're good.
Now I'm good. Usually they tell me 1, 2, 3, and then I have to wait, and I always mess it up. So, but we started these as a way to reach out with the arts to people. And what we learned was that particularly artists, there's a lot of message and a lot of things they had to say that it's interesting, it reaches people, it enhances the artistic experience. So thank you for doing that. And the first question I usually ask everybody is how they got into art and why.
Oh, of course. This is one of the top questions, right? Like, how does any artist get their start? I was a pretty precocious kid. I was inventing stuff all the time, drawing. You know, I think the typical story is that artists were good at drawing or good at something art related from a very young age. I was no different. And I was also really active. So if you didn't keep me busy, I would get in trouble pretty quickly.
Yep.
I needed something to do. And like I said, I was always interested in like building stuff or making things. And so just by this de facto, you got to keep Daric busy. I was kind of encouraged to be more creative. And growing up in a small town in the 80s, that wasn't necessarily understood as an arts career.
That's correct.
So,
yeah.
So I was going to be either like a physicist or an engineer, but I really was good at art, and like a lot of other creative people, that drove me to be more creative, drove me to have new ideas. And in high school, there was a few people, I think a couple grades up above me, that ended up going to Columbus College of Art and Design for more commercial related stuff.
Right.
And my art teacher, Dean Stewart, at the time kind of nudged in that direction. And I was debating whether or not to go into physics or go into art. And Maureen, Mo, as I know her,
Maureen
and I invited Mo to the Columbus College of Art and Design for a campus visit for myself, and I just fell in love with it. And I mean, I knew right then and there that was the job for me. I didn't know though what the career looked like. I just knew that this was a group of people that I really enjoyed being around, and it felt like home. And
do you think there is a path? I mean, people ask me this, is there really a path for an artist, or you take school here, you do this, you do this, you do this, or once you get trained, it's you make the path, versus there's a path that exists more, this you get to make that path?
What a great question. There are so many different careers in the arts, and I think for the common population, when you hear the word artist, you have this like one type in mind.
Right.
And anyone can become an artist, whether they have a high school education or fifth grader or a college education.
Mm-hmm.
I think anyone can really become an artist. It just depends on what field you want to go into and what your unique path is. Anything in the arts, like writing, dance, fine arts, commercial arts, they all have their own type of drive and their own type of trajectory. And so if you wanted to get a job as a designer working for some corporate office, you would have to have a college degree in order to make that step. But as far as like the top advice I can give someone who wants to go into the fine arts, I think the first thing that you need to know isn't the educational side of it. It's a personal drive. Like you have to be self-motivated. That's the biggest tip I can give, is if that's the field you want to go into, you have to be a self-driven person.
I agree with that. I think too.
I hope that the sound is okay. Like I'm in this like sound booth.
Oh no, it's wonderful.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm in the sound booth, and like 30 seconds before you got on, there was like a group of people that started talking next door. So,
We'll have a truck that goes by occasionally. So
oh,
we're
sounds
good. I
good.
mean, and I hope these things are more of a conversation. I mean, that's my goal with this, is that anyone listening, it's a conversation with artists. I wanted to dispel notions. I wanted to just bust stereotypes. One of the things I want to ask you is, when I look through your work, which by the way is amazing,
Thank you so much.
I loved it. It makes you think, it makes you feel. That's what I like most about it, is that you talk about your love of science, and you took that love of science and you integrated it into your art. It's not like, I'm going to become an artist, therefore I drop off all these other disciplines. They're integrated, which I like STEM, but I always feel like they should have made it STEAM and put the arts in, because not any one discipline can you just take out of life.
Yeah, this is a really interesting and very important question. So I taught college level for
That's right.
a few years. So I taught at University of Cincinnati, and I taught at Columbus College of Art and Design, and back early 2000s. And not coming from the high school side of the teaching, it was always this debacle that would happen about like what is STEAM and STEM, and the schools
Right.
that would have this conversation. And for me, being someone who I liked science. I use a lot of math in my work now. I
Right.
am very much a fine artist though. And so having that background in both areas, I didn't understand why there needed to be a fight about it. It was just
Right.
like creative problem solving is important for the, any fringe area of medicine and science. Uh, these creative problem solvings need to be encouraged in order to come up with new and
Yep.
exciting answers to questions that aren't right there at the surface. And so
Yeah.
you're right. There is a conversation about like just adding the word art back into that conversation is really important.
Well, we say here that there's an art to every science and a science to every art. So
Mhm.
obviously in art, there's things that you can learn. There's just, how to draw. There's a technique that you can learn. Beyond that is what you do with it is art. But the same thing is true in science. There is, beyond it, what is known becomes creativity in art. And I don't
Yeah,
know.
and any of those fringe areas, if you're talking the higher echelons of any career, you have to have a creative mindset and an
Mhm.
artful approach. I mean, really, in your mind, and any listener that's listening, if you take any profession and grow it to the highest level, there is certainly a creative aptitude there. And
Yeah.
the idea that a problem can't be solved through just linear approach. But I could also say the same thing for the world of arts, and that is being a business owner, a small business owner
Right.
working in the arts. There needs to be some savvy on like your taxes and basic levels of understanding like a mortgage, studio costs, materials
Right.
costs, how to bill a client for your work. So I don't think one side needs to be forgotten about at all. And that goes
I
both
don't
ways.
either. And I see that in your work. I think that's what really amazes me, is that I want to bust that stereotype that an artist has no track of time and doesn't care about things other than producing their art. Well, okay, that's not true. Just similarly, a scientist is not someone who wears a lab coat and goggles and never comes out of a lab. I don't know
Right.
where we get these stereotypes, but we've got to, I think, for kids who want to go into the arts, they need to understand it's not that this vision and this vision and this vision. It's so much bigger than that. It's so much, I think the field is so huge.
It is. And now more than ever, a lot of blending is happening. in schools, there's microcontrollers are being taught at a young age. And of course, at that small level, the task isn't like how to water your plants or how to create a monitor in a car. They're just creative things like, can you pick up this Lego block and put it over here? And
Right.
these are great little experiments for young
Yeah.
adults and kids to do. And all of that is really part of a creative mindset. It really is.
I agree.
My classification is interdisciplinary. And usually when I tell people that word, their eyes just gloss over. So a good way to describe it is it's like being a triathlete. If you're a triathlete, you're a runner, you're a swimmer, you're a bicyclist. And to say that you're only one of those would negate all of the
Right.
practice and the skills that you've developed over many years to do that. So I'm a painter. I have, as you saw, there are really lifelike oil
Right.
paintings that travel
Yes.
all over the world. I have a line of robotics and really interesting little fun machines that are interactive.
Well, let's
And
talk about some of what because it's not all over the map, but it definitely is a lot of different areas, which I think that's why to me it was fascinating, because there's just creativity that pops up here and here and here, and it's all interrelated, but yet it's neat to see that it's not, well, this person does still lifes and only still lives. That's just not how still life. That's not how it's done. So let's
right.
start with your toe heads. I thought,
Okay.
because those were cool. I mean, I think that I think it's just fun and whimsical, and I think you told a story about how those started.
Yeah. So the toe head, I was a very, very blonde kid. I am almost white hair. And growing up, I was always called a towhead. This is a term that happens all the time. It was almost a point of embarrassment that by my 20s, I didn't realize that that was meaning like the flaxen seed,
Yeah,
the flaxen haired toe. And I just forever grew up thinking it was like a big toe. Um,
I love
and
that.
while I was doing this work, I was teaching. I was grading a bunch of papers. I was doing this very serious work that was high skill level and just really in depth. And I love that group of work, but I needed a whimsical break. And so I started drawing these like little toe figures. And I had a guy who wanted an inlay in a table of one of these characters. And this was right as the economic collapse in 2007 or 8 happened.
Yeah.
So I had this drawing. I loved it. It sat in my sketchbook. And eventually he backed out because, unfortunately he lost a lot of his money. But I just had this little illustration. And this is unlike anything I'd ever done. I didn't go into art as an illustrator. I was really classically trained as a painter and a sculptor. And so after a while, I just started making these little guys, and I gave a few away for Christmas, and then they just blew up after that.
Don't you have like a whole business now, or
Oh
a
yeah, I have
division
multiple
that's, yes,
businesses.
what I thought.
I've slowed down on the towhead side specifically because I have a lot more work that's going into museums, and
Gotcha.
a lot of the fine art stuff has excelled in a way that has allowed me to travel the world and do a lot of these huge things. But yeah, I mean, we all need a break from some of that seriousness sometimes, and they're just so fun
They're
and
just,
whimsical that
yeah, they just make you smile. I mean, that's really that you just kind of go, hey, that's cool. And I think it's a break from the day. Just
yeah, they were designed to be the same kind of intellectual prowess as the other stuff, packaged in a way that was just like a comic strip, from your childhood.
which,
So
a lot of comics are awfully intelligent when you really look at them.
of course, yeah, and that's the challenge that those provide is how do you. So for people who don't know what they look like, they don't usually have arms sometimes, and they don't have legs. Hardly, I don't think any of them have legs. So trying to tell a story with just eyes and a little bit of motion. Uh, I mean, I
That's
have,
actually kind of cool when you think about that.
yeah, I still have maybe 2,000 drawings that haven't been turned into
Wow.
full things,
Wow.
so
Wow.
folders of these things.
That's like, okay, let's move from there to your absolute series. Because that's another one I think is fascinating
Yeah,
and
so
neat.
the absolutes started about the same time that I was leaving teaching. I had maybe one or two. These are much more sophisticated, if I can use that
Yeah,
word,
yeah.
still lifes that look like very real objects. In fact, a lot of times when I'm showing people, they are like, well, how do you get them to stick to the wood is what I usually paint to. And I'm like, well, it's just a painting. It's not a real object. Um, these were to tell very sensitive narratives, very sensitive stories. Again, sort of in the mindset of the towheads. Actually, it would have been the other way around. How to tell this very elaborate narrative and using the fewest elements possible. And it started a long time ago as being like the 5 basic symbols that we use throughout history. Over
Okay.
time, they've created their own kind of language. I mean, there's I think 45 or 50 of those paintings. Um, and so people turn into objects, or a mood is a certain color. And I take a lot of walks in nature to kind of clear my head. And while I live in the city now, um, I still appreciate being outdoors and being in the woods, kind of the way I grew up. So it's to kind of display these pieces that are in the still lives is almost they're like historical artifacts, but telling a story. And the more you pay attention from one piece to another, you can see the story gets bigger. And
Oh, I like
there's
that.
this orbit where there's a small little meaning within the individual painting. And then there's a meaning within a group of series of paintings. And then there's even another meaning within the whole series of the absolutes. And, those have traveled all over the world.
I was going to ask you
South
about that. I
Korea.
think I have here that it went to South Korea and Cuba and Germany. I mean,
Yeah, right now there's 4 paintings at the Columbus Museum of Art that will be on display along with my robotics work um, until April 26th or 27th. 3 of those paintings were ones that I made while on residency. I lived in Germany in 2019 for 3
yeah,
months
I saw
and
that.
made some work there. And 3 of the pieces are on display at the museum. And then one of the pieces that I didn't do in Germany is part of a series part of the Absolute series, but I had done work that went to Cuba, and this is a sister piece to the
Okay.
one that lives in Cuba now. It's going to be on display at a contemporary art center, I think, when it's fully built. So
Now,
I
is
was,
there a?
I was able to go to Cuba too. So that was
Oh, that's
amazing.
that's actually. I'm just amazed by this. Is there a central message? I mean, I know that some artists don't want to give their central message because they want people that look at the piece to kind of have their own. But when you were doing
Uh,
this, was there something that you just really wanted to say? Was it,
yeah, what I wanted to do was take these life examples that we're all very familiar with, something that seemed very familiar, whether that's life and death or love and disdain, or a situation, and boil it down inch by inch to something that was universally a feeling, a mood.
hmm,
And I like to pitch opposites next to each other. It's
gotcha.
just part of who I am as a person anyway. Um, and that series was supposed to be able to let you look deeper and think heavier on something, or if you just wanted to appreciate it on the level that, hey, it looks pretty. I wanted to make this multi-tiered approach that a scholar can appreciate something, someone who is, just right off the street and walks into a gallery can appreciate something. But I wanted to take these personal experiences that I had, look around and see what it looked like through other people's eyes, and boil it down, distill it down to something that we all can kind of appreciate. If
I
that
really
makes
like
sense.
that. I mean, I think when we see a piece come in here, somebody might, there was one I'm thinking in particular, it was an abstract piece. And they would come in and they'd walk by it the first time and say, well, that's a nice piece. And if they were in here repeatedly, they'd stop the second time and say, well, I never saw that in there before. And usually by the fourth or fifth time, they're like, did you know this was in here? Did you see this? And that's what I like about art, is that you're like you said, it's layered. It's not, it's like it speaks, and it speaks many times over.
Yeah, it's this game that we try as artists as much as possible to come up with an idea, put it in the work, and then we have to let it go. So as much information as we can lead you to, we can. And then we have to turn it over to you and your experiences and what do you bring to the table. And our job is really to try to mitigate some of those things that we don't want to be in it, but
Right.
allow you to also bring something to it. I don't want to say something that is really not what I mean, but I
Right.
have a responsibility to bring to the table something for you to think about, and then also allow you to be part of that experience and bring something to it to feed into it. And that's a really hard communication. It's a language that we speak without even being in the room with another person. That's my
But
favorite part of it.
yeah, that to me is, that's the nature of art, is that it transcends gender, it transcends language, it transcends culture. It is a universal language unto itself.
Right.
That to me, I'm not an artist. I'm an administrator is really what I am, but I love art. And I
Yeah.
can tell you, when someone gets on a stage, they can stand on that stage and they can reach 700 people. And they can collectively have a universal reaction, yet in an individual reaction. And they're all in the same room.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's one of the more special things about art. Unlike a lot of other professions, and I'm going to talk about the creative class rather than just a visual artist, but the creative class, that could be a writer, a dancer, a choreographer, a visual artist, people who do it as more of the non-commission side. We're every step of the business.
Right, that's
So
correct.
if we switch over to the business side real quick, as I said, I like to do, you're the concept maker, you're the production manager,
Yep.
the fabricator, the marketer, and the public voice. And now if you switch back to being the artist again, that is particularly one of the reasons why it's such a sensitive thing for people to get their work out there, to present it. It's because since we are the owner of all of those levels, a success is super amazing, and a failure is also super amazing in its own right too. But like you
Right.
said, if you are in an auditorium with 300-400 people and there's an atmosphere of being moved, that has a meaning and a real potency that we just can't find anywhere else.
No, it's a unity. I've been in an auditorium when we had Melissa Manchester, and she was singing a cappella. She was singing Over the Rainbow. And the era that I have for my audience, that would be perfect.
Yeah.
You could hear a pin drop. You could hear people breathe. You could see everybody processing it. And what was so unique is that it was together. So they were unified in their experience, yet this person over here was smiling and tears were coming down this person's face. So clearly, while the message was together, it was still individual, which at that moment, I've never been more proud of the creative side, of the art side, because it touched people beyond words, beyond it just soared right into the soul. And that to me is amazing.
Terrific example. I mean, that is such a terrific example. When I was teaching, I would use an example of like in a classroom, I would just say, okay, I want everybody to think of their favorite food. And each person would have a completely different like food in their mind. And then I would have them rotate that food in their mind. Imagine what it tastes like. When's the first time that you had that food? These are completely abstract thoughts.
Right.
But we all have that familiar base. And on just a core level, that is this very difficult plane to try to talk about and say we all can do this. We all can remember when we had this food. We have a favorite food. What is favorite food? You know,
right? Yeah.
And it's this unifier, and like an a cappella piece of music is the version in the arts that speaks to, is this unifying experience that we all can share and somehow we can't describe. And that is the beautiful moment. That is the moment, you know, that as a visual artist, that's what I try to take, that special moment and make an object that also provides that same experience. It's
and you know, when you see them, it is, I mean, there's, you can think of things, Mona Lisa, which to our generation probably doesn't communicate as well as it did to certain other generations. But there was a reason why everybody tapped into that picture. And you can think of other things today where universally, globally, people, there's that piece of art because it tapped into exactly that little space. And I don't know of any other occupation that can do that.
Oh, I know. I was at the museum, Columbus Museum of Art 2 weeks ago, and I was taking photos of my installation, my robotics piece, and like over and over and over, there were little kids that would walk up to it, and I designed it so that it would be both handicapped accessible and then also viewable for kids to look into.
Oh, that's cool.
Like over and over and over, I think maybe 5 or 6 different kids while I was there just sat and stared at it, and like that is a total win for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've engaged with a group of people that I don't have anything to talk about with per se, in a language that they understand, in a language that they appreciate, that stopped them dead in their tracks and just like.
And that's a hard group, by the way.
It is. Oh my gosh, it is. Yeah.
If you got that group, you really did well.
Thank you. Yeah.
Because, you know, I had children and I had grandchildren, so I'm here to tell you, if you got that group, pat yourself on the back.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Talk to me a little bit about your robotics, because I think those are cool.
So, like you said, you know, a lot of times in the world of art, people tend to do one thing or another, and I think that's completely fair. I mean, there's an honor in creating work that gets honed in year after year after year.
Right.
I've been a person that's liked to do many things, and I'm not a dabbler. So I'm not a person that just stops working on something, starts something, and then I'm super laser focused. And when I was a kid, I was part of the generation that still was allowed playing with electronics and fire and axes.
Yep, those things.
I was allowed to shock myself senseless, you know.
You and my boys would get along.
Yep. So a long time ago, I started building these, like, I mean, now I would call them interactive light sculptures, but at the time I was just piecing together stuff. Over the last nearing 40 years, the work has become far more specialized, and The latest in that series is I've created what's called the living machines.
Right.
And in that series, each machine has the ability to almost act like a human without the human side that we're all afraid of. It's like none of them have legs or do a task that's important. They all do something very ethereal. I have the shy machine that
I
is,
love that.
yeah. I was walking in the middle of the a rainforest in British Columbia, and I hike a lot, and all the animals were just so alive and coming out of their habitats. And but if you stomped around and made a bunch of noise, they would scurry away. And um, I kind of thought, like, what an interesting concept to try to put into work is a shyness based on sound and volume. So I created this like clamshell type sculpture that it senses motion, and as soon as it senses motion, it takes a sample of the sound, and if it's too loud, it'll shut the two
Oh,
halves together,
wow.
and it will display this really aggressive light. And if it's a quieter environment and it sees motion, then it'll separate and play this really, really soothing kind of light structure. And it also learns. So if the whole environment
Oh my
is
gosh.
constantly noisy, it will, every 10 minutes, it will resample the sounds of the room over a couple seconds and adapt so that it will be shy within a higher volume of room. And it also, like, kind of like if you walk into a room and everything just stops, if it's very loud and all of a sudden it gets super quiet, it gets scared and shuts itself.
No, that's kind of a real life lesson there. When you really think about it.
Yeah, I think we're all part of that. They're kind of like organisms that are machines, as if a person was talking about an organism that is a machine. You know, this.
Right. But to think about, I'm thinking about in terms of children coming in and seeing it. Shyness is a hard concept to explain to a child. But if they're seeing it, they can get it. You know, and what's learning? Well, okay, you don't have to be loud and rowdy. You know, maybe there's people who don't appreciate that. You know,
yeah. So I hear that adults have a harder time with that concept than kids.
Yeah.
Kids do have a hard time with that concept, but as an adult, you start to relearn how to be a functioning adult. And sometimes you get rid of the idea of being quiet and listening and observing. And that was something that I could see adults having an issue with as well. So there's, I think, 4 pieces that are growing in their complexity. The latest one is this geometric pod that's at the museum right now. This one it took about a year to build during the pandemic. And so it was this like feat of accomplishment. I'm just so happy that it worked out. But it's this mirrored geometric pod that is motion sensing. And anytime you walk up to it, it will create a action of lights that's based off of places I've traveled. Like I've sampled colors from different places I've traveled. And it also connects to Wi-Fi, and it figures out where it's located in the world. So it's geolocating, and it uses that GPS location each day to figure out when the sun rises that day and sets that day, which changes every single day. And then it fits alarms like chimes of a clock. It shrinks all 24 hours of the day just into the time that the sun is up. So there are 24 new chimes that are fit within just the time the sun is up. And then, of course, there's also chimes that happen on the hour. And those chimes they're all music that I composed and I wrote based off of the
composed and wrote. Did I get that right? You also compose and write music.
Yes. I mean, to the
That's
level that I can put it in a museum, but not to a level in which I would sit next to a PhD student or a doctorate student in music and say that I'm a composer. So
so is it
um,
piano or is it any other instrument that you
I wrote it on a MIDI keyboard, but
gotcha?
it's there are the new hours are a symphony of sounds, and the normal hours, so the normal time that the
Gotcha.
clock changes, those are a marimba. But all of those were recorded as on a keyboard and then
Gotcha.
changed as a MIDI sound. I live in a small apartment. I can't afford African rosewood marimba.
That's okay. I mean, my daughter's a musician, and
Oh, yeah.
one of the things I learned about her is that she has a very visual arts side, and then she is a classically trained musician, symphony, that sort of thing. And she, like you, teaches. She is the doctor, but on the other hand, she'll bring out paints and she'll just do something abstract. And it's
Yeah.
not the area she was trained in. And it's interesting because that is a relaxation area for her. But my point is that with artists, they're not just talented in one area. It's like if one area for some reason you weren't to draw or you weren't to paint, it will come out in music, or it will come out some way.
Oh, yeah. I was a musician for many years growing up. Music was always being played in our house. So it was kind of this part of the utility belt that I could wear and pull out if I needed to. But yeah, I haven't been able to use that section of my utility belt in a while, and it was just itching to come out. And since this machine can play sounds, and I had originally designed this. One of the great exercises in flexibility that I had to learn from this project was my initial concept was going to be taking samples from different locations in the world and use those locations, those samples of sound as these chimes. As I couldn't travel, I had to come up with this scenario, and I had already gotten
Oh,
a
that's
grant.
right.
I mean, I had gotten a grant for this, so I had to make it. I knew it was going to be at the museum, so there was this natural challenge of like it just has to be made. And so a wonderful problem to have is that I had to dust off that skill set and use it for the work. And I'm very happy that it worked out that way.
I think it's thrilling that, I think if anybody listening, they'll know that it's not one dimensional. There's so many. I'm getting the signal that we're at 30 minutes.
Okay.
And you can cut this part out. But yeah, one of the things is that I like that. If someone's listening, I want them to understand it's not what everyone's telling you. It's not between this line and this line. It's not in a box. It's not you just study to be a painter. That's not what it is. It's creativity. It's, yeah, maybe it comes out in the form of painting. Maybe it comes out in the form that you're a musician. But there's that creativity that it can manifest itself in science. It can manifest itself in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I've worked with CoSci quite a few times, and I'm currently engaged with a project for next year with CoSci, and this is a conversation that people bring up to me all the time. I mean, CoSci is our Center of Science and
Yeah.
Industry. I have gotten the question, like, what if I don't get this very abstract sculpture? And what am I supposed to walk away with? I think there's a little tenderness about like, I might not understand it when I walk into it. And I'm completely fine with that. Like I said earlier, there are multi tiers in which I want someone to appreciate these. If it's a little kid who grows up to be a scientist as a result of this, they took something in the arts,
Right.
inspired them from the core root of art, and then whatever they make out of that is completely fine with me, because you still can't steal away the original story, which is
Right.
they went to an art museum, they saw something that engaged them, and they grew from that experience. And that selfishness, I think I see from occupation to occupation, is being like, we want to be the owner of that origin. I just don't know if that needs to be there. I
I
want to play
agree with
nice
that.
in all of these fields, you know?
What do you think? And this is Maureen and I talked about this a little bit. What is art's job?
Oh yeah, and she had talked about communication and how
Yeah.
that was a key role. I couldn't agree more. I, it's a language that I never feel like my work is done until it's being viewed or in someone else's hands. So like, I don't want it at my house. I want you to have it. I want other people to have it. That's how much I
Mm,
value communication. It, to me, it fundamentally is not done. It's not complete until it engages with somebody else. And so the role of artwork should be broad. It shouldn't be such a narrow thing. It should be broad. And it could expand from creating a movement that creates equality. It could be something that's
mhm.
touching the feelings of sentimentality or dealing with death and finding a way to like grow emotionally. It could be how to reflect on the cultural significance of, like a historical moment.
Right.
But all of those still are under that umbrella that Maureen had talked about, which is this communication and a delivery of experience. And I certainly agree with that. If I'm not making it for my house and I'm making it for you, it fundamentally needs to be able to attach to something that you like, something that I like, and have that mutual conversation
Right.
between the two of us without me even being there.
It's
So
it's a
it's like,
union of the souls, which
absolutely.
that part, Marie and I talk about that too. It's not only is it intimate, but it's also group. I
Yeah.
mean, there is from the artist to the recipient, that's very intimate, but it also can be
Yeah.
displayed huge. It's that to me, I think that's why I'm in the arts, is because I have seen what it does for people. I have watched people be moved. I have watched people, have memories come back. I've been in concerts where a song is played and immediately someone's back 50 years. I've seen
Yeah.
that power.
I don't teach anymore. I haven't taught since 2010, but I give a lot of workshops and I work a lot with people who have developmental disabilities or
Mm,
something like that. And to even go beyond just the core normal conversation of like, how does it operate for me and you? I've also seen it change the way someone can live their life
oh,
who
wow.
may never have those options until artwork is presented to them, both as a way to make work, to develop their physical strengths, their mental acuity, but also just giving them an ability to engage with the rest of the world. And so it's a floater, right? It goes from
Right,
one
right.
place to another and can function differently for one group of people to another, but one way or another, it does unify. And that is a special aspect of the arts that, I mean, is unparalleled in my
It's
opinion.
unparalleled. I mean, I think when people read the letters that we put out, when I say that, art surpasses language, it surpasses, gender, it surpasses culture, I think they think that sometimes that's just words, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It is definitely a soul to soul thing. And there isn't anything else I know that does that.
Yeah. Remember, I mean, I've gone to a lot of different countries and, living in Europe, living in other places, and then like traveling to very remote locations,
Mm.
a unifier really can be just a visual communication that is art, and history can be told that way. Going to a museum of a place that's been, 2,000 to 3,000 years of history and seeing the artwork, I personally have been moved almost to tears just by seeing like something that had nothing to do with me, but just knowing that, like, when I was living in Germany, I lived in Dresden, and my apartment was in a place that was firebombed, and the people that I were great friends with were products of all of the history that came after that. And knowing the place that you're having a cafe latte is also a place that has seen a history that's beyond your own. It's in the music, it's in the poetry, it's in the visual arts, it's in the conversation and the oral tradition, the storytelling. Same goes for Cuba. And then you can bring that home and live in your house here and apply that exact same things. How do I look at my history? How do I look at my area and connect deeply with that and tell a full, well-rounded story that way?
I just think I think when Marines, we talked about a handprint 1,000 years ago that still exists,
Yeah.
surpasses history. It's still communicating to this day. And that, there's just there, I don't want to use the word power, but it is kind of like that. It's it's just powerful and it's meaningful, and it's, if I can get anything across to people, it's an occupation worth having. If I don't even think it's an occupation, I think it's a vocation. I think it's a lot more than that. It's a whole soul experience, if you really want to know.
Yeah, I think it's a lifestyle.
Yeah, maybe that's a better way
It's
to
a
put it.
lifestyle that starts in the morning, ends at night, and it's not something that I consider a job, because I really love what I do. I do think that, like, it requires a unique view of the world, and that needs to grow every single day. And I've learned a lot of failures and a lot of successes, and I can say both were valuable in becoming an artist. And I still have years and years of development and growth to go to. And it's a lifestyle that I have to apply as I go older. Like I said, I'm nearing 40, and I still don't feel like I'm an adult, and I still don't feel like I've fully grown in the arts. It's something that forever will be challenging, and I am so happy that that is a challenge to be presented for the next several decades.
I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for this interview. I hope, my goal with these is that people are inspired. My goal is that you just understand a little bit more about what's behind art, or people producing it, and that maybe, just maybe, you look at it just a hair differently.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you having me on. I have an artist and resource section on my website, www.daricgill.com. That's DARICGILL. I have an artist resource section specifically because I don't teach anymore. And I did not have access to a lot of like free resources for people who are just beginning in the arts. I've partnered with other people in the arts to come up with ways to encourage and really engage with an up and coming arts community. So there are free things that go anywhere from how to price your artwork, or what kind of work
Oh
do you
gosh,
do,
that's fabulous.
what to do if you're having an artist dry spell, things that are just basic level questions that I get repeatedly asked. I think people should really be able to access for free. So by all means, if there's any way that I can help someone, go to the artist resource section. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to find somebody that does.
I think that's fabulous. I can't thank you enough. I know that I encourage people to Google you. look at your
Oh, thank you.
artwork. Go down. I think you're at the Columbus Museum, correct? Columbus Museum of Art.
Yeah, Columbus Museum of Art. Yeah.
Go down and see it, experience it, take your kids. I just, and thank you. This has been absolutely, it's fascinating. There's an energy that I love.
Oh, thank you so much. I really
mean,
appreciate you reaching out. And tell Maureen, thank you. When next
I
time you see
will.
her,
I will.
we're
I
connecting.
definitely will. I'm going to
She's a
thank her.
sweetheart, and her interview was just spectacular. She did a great job.
She is she's a dynamo. And
She
I'm
is.
so thrilled she's on the board. We have this art gallery, and I said to her, I want to do, and you know, we're in an area where the art is not, it's not that it's not flourishing. Let's just say it's not recognized like a football game.
Of course. Same here, even in Columbus.
And I said to her, I want this community to grow. I want it like a haven for artists, or even if you're not, to come in, get inspired, believe that you can try it. And I said, when we set up the shows, I want to do one or two that are a bit more socially conscious. I said, I don't want to slap people in the face with it, but I want them to think, you know, so.
Yeah, I've gotten to a point in my career where I've learned that I need to respect that there is a 17-year-old out there, a 21-year-old out there, a 5-year-old out there who's looking up to someone and saying, what does it look like? We all walk through this path thinking that there's more room to grow, but at some level, I am the adult in the room a lot of times, whether I feel like it or not. And I need to provide that. I have a responsibility to my peers in my community to provide access to the arts and to an artist. And these conversations really, really help with that.
I'm so grateful. I mean, that's the whole goal of this, is in our small little area to somehow try to get these messages out that it's far. I mean, if a kid realized how exciting it was and what messages they could, that it's their way to send a message. It's their way to have a voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that, I would love to see some teenagers really embrace the fact that maybe, I'm going to say this with a qualifier, maybe if they can have a voice.
Well, yeah, even someone in their 50s and 60s who's looking to start into the arts and just never felt like they could. That is also a resource that we need to provide with those people too. So by all means, keep me in the loop, and I certainly appreciate the conversation.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful. I mean, I'm just thrilled. I really am.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.